Take. I'm your host, AJ Kirsten. NewEnglandTake.com to get more from the show. It is a Substack and a great way to support the show. Every episode in your inbox, as well as you can check out the show on all major podcast platforms and YouTube. Big thank you to WKXL for picking up the program every Saturday at 8:30 a.m. WKXL 1450 a.m., 103.9 FM Concord, and 101.9 FM in Manchester. Also, GraniteGrock.com and Concord TV also pick up the show. Thank you to them. If you have any opinions on any of this or any guest ideas, shoot me an email, aj@newenglandtake.com. I respond to every email, and I really like to see how you guys agree or disagree, or any other guest ideas. I've received a few guest ideas because of that. Excited this week to have a returning guest, Melanie Plenda of the Granite State News Collaborative. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So I've previously had you on a couple times to talk about the Granite State News Collaborative, but it's 2026, everything has changed. At a high level, what's the status of the collaborative before we dive into a Publisher's Crawl series you guys got going on?
Yeah, well, it's been very busy since the last time I talked to you, but essentially we're still a collective of more than 25 or 30 local news outlets, along with college outlets and nonpartisan nonprofit community groups that produce content and information, who've agreed to work together to get more people in New Hampshire news they need. And so we're still doing that. And I'd say the biggest things that have happened in the years since I talked to you is we've sort of started to expand into some local news innovation, and we've incubated a couple of big projects, and one of which is a content sharing platform, which we just won the Innovator of the Year award for, which was a national honor from the Local Media Association. So we've been doing that. We've launched a New Hampshire Community News Fund, which is a growing kind of pool. It's small still. I say it's growing because it's still very small, and we're still sort of taking it bit by bit. But it's a way to collectively fundraise together and pool funds to benefit all of local journalism. So those are the biggest things, and we're still doing all the great stuff we were doing before, like the in-depth reporting and training up local journalists. We started a civic documenters program where we're training up community members to help local news outlets cover municipal meetings and school board meetings. So yeah, we've been very busy. And now we have
Yes.
these publisher crawls.
Yeah, definitely. And it's collaborativenh.org if anyone wants to check out what the collaborative's got going on. Follow them on all the socials and stuff. Melanie's very busy. I run into her occasionally. I'm like, oh, you're over here too. I'm like, how are you squeezing in all these projects? Because we've been talking about here on the show since I started doing it 5 years ago. The local news is really it's a transformative period. Like, things are not stable. Like, it is all over the place, where either outlets need to work with each other in some fashion, or go under, or totally innovate the way they deliver their news. Whether it's some outlets that are entirely online, there are some outlets that are still doing subscriber base and things of that nature. Like, this is a dynamic time. You can't just be sitting still.
Right, exactly. And I think that what's great about New Hampshire and what we're doing in New Hampshire is that I think I probably have told you this before too. I think we're very special, but we don't have to be unique, and the fact that our partners recognize that a rising tide lifts all boats, and so we're better off working together where it makes sense and collaborating and doing, and that doesn't mean they don't still compete with each other. That doesn't mean, but it does mean looking to the bigger picture to see how do we make sure that we're all still here, well into the future, and that we're not just surviving, but that we actually can thrive, and we can actually, do what it is that we do best, which is inform our communities. So it is a very transformative time, and maybe I'm just an eternal optimist, but it makes me very hopeful, honestly, because I'm seeing all the ways that, we're even just a decade ago, people would have said, in fact, I'll give you a perfect example. Several years ago, I mentioned to our collaborative, who was already working together, I was like, hey, what do you guys think about maybe collectively fundraising, like working together to raise money? And they were like, hard no. So like it never got off the ground. And then not a year later, I brought it up again. They're like, yeah, let's start figuring out how we might do that. So they are willing, especially maybe I'm partial to my partners, but I feel like lots of folks are willing to sort of trust and try new things and be innovative in a way that I'm not sure we always have been in journalism before. And I really do think that we've all really leaned into, again, something that local news does best, which is to try to be in our communities and to understand what our communities need and to actually have a conversation with our communities and try to figure out, what we can do better, how we can change, how we can meet people where they are instead of, maybe I think we're less and less falling back on, well, we're doing this thing because we've always done it that way. I don't hear that nearly as much as I used to anymore. I see them really trying to meet the moment and get out ahead of a lot of these things for sure. So it makes me hopeful and excited because I see a lot of new and interesting ideas and things coming out of these past few years, and I think going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those things where the from from a free market perspective, like we want some competition. You want a little bit. Yeah, they need to work together, but they also need to push each other, which seems to be really
Yeah.
happening a lot more because it's the nature of the beast right now. We saw papers, especially in rural New Hampshire, go under if no one's there to cover the story and share it through
Yep.
the collaborative or something like that. It means people don't know what the hell's happening, and that's terrible.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think, and yes to the competition thing, and that's something that I think we've all always respected about each other in this collaborative, and certainly what I've tried to respect about my partners is that they each are running their own business, they are running their own shops. They need to do what is first and foremost best for them and the communities that they are serving. And what I think is great is it has been this blend of, okay, there's that, but where's that part in the Venn diagram where it works to everyone's benefit to do something together or to combine a resource or to do something that will save everyone a little money or whatever. I will say too, what's interesting is I'm seeing more and more, speaking of rural outlets, more and more people, just regular average people, not journalists, have been starting these hyper local outlets to fill that need and fill that gap. And I love hearing from them because I think that's part of what our job at the collaborative is too, is like, how can we partner with them? How can we assist them? There needs to be more information, more outlets out there, big, small, whatever, because at the end of the day, we have to be able to get information to people. We do need people covering those communities. Or right now at a local municipal meeting, it's probably just the select board and nobody else. And that's not it's not healthy for a democracy. It's not healthy for a local municipality. And honestly, it's not even good for those governing boards, like half the time, things may happen that if they don't know what people want, they're only going by what they think is right. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean,
Yeah.
we all need that accountability and those people in those rooms. And so I see that happening more and more. I'm really encouraged by it. And I like to try to see how we can be of assistance in any way to those groups for sure.
It's one of those things where it's always fun to crap on social media and all these sorts of
Right.
platforms that are out there, but when it comes down to what's going on at the local level, it's hugely democratizing. Anyone can go out there and
Yeah.
do it, and you can be on multiple. Like, it's just me. Like the New England Take doesn't have a whole bunch of players. Like I got Dexter
Right.
sometimes as a contributor, but we just talk smack for 30 minutes, and then
Right.
we
Right.
talk politics. Like you can be on 15 platforms, and it takes just as much work as to post on 3. And it's something where now you find that platform that's going to work, and anyone can do it. You can create a Substack for free. Get paid subscribers. It's one of the things with the shuttering of a lot of the aspects of the Washington Post the last year. Those reporters are going to be just fine if they're smart about it because
Oh,
they've
yeah.
got an
Right.
audience already. It's like if you want this specific team's coverage from the guy that's already doing it, he doesn't need
Yep.
the Washington Post anymore. He can do that, and
Right.
we're seeing like like especially the online outlets that we've got in the state. Yeah, they've got some backing, like the Journal and the Bulletin, but it
Mhm.
exists because of if email is where people are getting news. It's because of social media and working together and things like that.
Absolutely. In fact, I've just was invited to talk about this. NHPR had a conversation about sort of the rise of the citizen journalist and how does that fit into the larger journalism ecosystem, if you will, you know? And I honestly, like, I feel like I think it's a good thing because, again, it's more people having more eyes on what's happening and communicating that to people who need to have that information. And especially in places where otherwise there would not be that information would not get out to people because there may not be a local news reporter who's there to cover it. And so, what I would love to see, I would love to, and I think I'm seeing this in other places nationally, and I think that this will become a trend, but I would love to see more traditional journalists partnering with those citizen journalists because I know in my experience with citizen journalists, they have a deep curiosity and they deeply care about their community or whatever it is they're covering. And that is always a good start for journalism. That's a good start for any good reporter, you know? And so if we have the sort of technical experience or the ethical guidelines that we can share that with a content creator or we can share that with a citizen journalist, I think it's incumbent upon us to do that because at the end of the day, they want to get out accurate information. They want to make sure they're not, it's for the vast majority of them, they just want to make sure people have this information. I think we should actively be trying to work with content creators to make sure that we're all working together, we're all being ethical. And, I think that there's room for that. I think we need all of the above
And you
in
really
our
need that
information system.
anyways nowadays. Like influencer marketing has a really negative connotation, but it's just a person that has influence over an audience to be able to get word out. And that's exactly what this is. Like it's one of those
Frankly,
things.
they're reaching people that traditional media likely is not.
Yeah.
Like the people in their audience probably aren't picking up their local newspaper or even reaching them online. And so if we can, I mean, that's why it's a win-win, really. If we partner up and we each try to help each other in an ethical and responsible way, now we're reaching sort of that next generation maybe of local news consumers.
And that's what radio was back in the day. Like
Yeah.
even just 10, 15 years ago, you'd have your morning show host that was like the guy, and that's unfortunately talk radio is really still struggling through this transformation. There are a few players, but there's so much transition going on. Like Jeff Chittister is doing a great job at WFEA. We got Ken Kale over on WKXL. Chris Ryan is still doing his thing at WGIR, taking over after Jack Heath, and Jack Heath is now over at TPL. But they're all doing like
Right, right.
different things that aren't necessarily hitting the same audiences in a productive way. It feels like it's difficult. And radio really it's one of these things that are transitioning now is figuring out that next angle. I'm doing my crazy little thing, going online and also being on WKXL and things of that nature because I think radio still has a lot of value for the future. But we
Oh,
gotta
sure.
we
Yeah.
gotta all work together and figure this
Yeah.
out.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about the publisher's crawl. So where did this
Okay.
come from?
This came from we really wanted to get a better sense of, well, let me actually back up. So I told you we were starting this collective fundraising, sort of starting this local news fund at concept. And so we started sort of a strategic planning process as part of that. We wanted to figure out, how is this going to work? What were we going to do? What would it look like? And in that process, we kept coming back to the fact that whatever we did, we really needed to root it in what it is that people actually want, like a novel concept. But if we don't know specifically like how people are getting their news or why they like getting it there, then I mean, really, we're kind of just, shooting around in the dark. So we wanted to do listening sessions. And then one of our founders, Carol Robidoux, who all good ideas come from her, frankly, she came up with the idea. She was like, that sounded way more fun than what we were planning. She was like, why don't we like have like publishers from all of our partners like travel around the state and we could all get together and we could go to bars and we could like hang out with people and we could just talk to them and find out what they want. I'm like, and she's like, we can call it a publisher's crawl. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. So from there, like I went to work like trying to figure out, okay, how is this gonna work? And I wasn't entirely certain all of our partners would be on board, but they loved it. They loved the idea. And so that's what we've done. So have we're trying to have one a month in and one in each region of the state because we really wanted to get out there and get all over the place. And for all of them, we have so the GSNC is kind of handling the logistics and setting it up and getting materials and stuff, but each our partner outlets are sort of hosting each one of these events. So the last ones we had, we had Manchester Inklink and Nashua Inklink host the first two. And we had Concord Monitor host the last one we did. We have Seacoast Online hosting one in, I believe, September or October. But we have all these different outlets who signed up for their region to be their host for these listening sessions. And so that's where the idea came from, where we really wanted to get a sense of, we kicked all of this off with a statewide news needs survey. So it's just your typical, traditional survey. But then for the actual publishers crawls, we decided that we really did not want it to be like a traditional listening session where we have a panel of people and they do a Q&A, which is great. But we really wanted it to be more inviting, a little more fun, a little more casual. So at each of these, we've been breaking people up into small groups. They register their free events, but they have all been at breweries or brew pubs. That was sort of just coincidental. We did want it to be like we wanted it to be at places where people were already gathering, like restaurants, bowling alleys, all that kind of fun stuff. Just so happens a lot of breweries. So we give them some free food. We have a few free prizes because we do a local news bingo to make it fun. But anyway, we break people up. We have a reporter or an editor at each small group that takes notes. They're not there to do anything other than listen to what the group has to say. Each group is given just like a basic general list of, conversation guiding questions, and they just talk. They talk to each other for 45 minutes, and then we come back together as a big group and we kind of report out the big surprising findings, and that's it. And then for our part, we gather up all that information, all of the data that we sort of collected in that, and then we put it together in here's what we've learned. And we try to share that out through a story or share that out with people who signed up to go. And we're just going to keep doing that once a month for the rest of the year. And hopefully we'll continue these again next year. But we've really, I think all of the partners who've done this so far have been surprised by what they're learning. Because I think it's easy for all of us to, and me too. I mean, I've been surprised. Like you think you know what people want or need, but then when you actually ask them and listen, sometimes, you definitely learn something new and you think of, okay, well then how do we address that? How do we get that for people? So yeah, so that's what they are.
Yeah, it's one of those things where as someone who does communications and PR for my day job, even like keeping track of just the numbers you see online are not always helpful to figure out what people are actually looking for, because you may not be thinking about what people are actually looking for. I mean, what are some of the big things that have really stood out as like, I didn't think people wanted this, but they are looking
Yeah.
for it.
Well, so what was super interesting, the biggest takeaway was that to a person, they've all said, we are not lacking for news, but we want help navigating what's out there. Like we
Yeah.
want to know, like, how do we know what to trust? How do we know how to find you? How do we know how to access what you are putting out there? And we may think it's obvious, like, well, we're out there, but there's a disconnect, and we do need to be in more places where people currently are, and in a way that they can access. So they do want, newsletters and some of their news to be in social media, and they want it to be easier to access because there's already lots of information out there that is super easy to access, and it's there, at the touch of the button. um, this was another thing I think that's very interesting. They really want their local news to be kind of like this hub of information that helps them navigate their communities. So like and like from the basic thing, like we want a community calendar. We want something so that we know where everything is, and not every outlet has that, you know. We want local government information. We want information about bus routes. Like in Manchester, that was a big one. Like I just want to know how the bus system works because I don't, and I want to know that I can go to my local news outlet and find that information. So those are the kinds of things, and like explainers and voting information and things like that. They do want they want news that is more explanatory, and they want follow-ups on the things that they read. And I thought that was one that actually jumped out to me because I remember even back when I was a reporter, working at Daily, is that was part of the thing. Like, let's say an incident happens in downtown Keene, and you cover that, and then you would cover the day two, and then maybe you would cover if there's a trial, or you would cover something, you followed up on all of these different things. And I think, and what they're telling us is that's happening less and less. And they want that follow up. They want to know what happened to this person that got into an accident, what happened to their family, and that's not to say local news outlets aren't doing that, but I do think like they are noticing a drop off in that kind of activity. And I think that would track with a lot of outlets who have had to pare back on reporters, or there's not always enough time to go back and follow up because there's new news happening. But like that was really interesting to me that they actually do want that kind of follow up, and they do want their local news to give the context, the explanation, the why of what's going on, for sure.
And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's been a constant issue where we see the headline of, oh gosh, this terrible thing has happened, but they never hear about why it actually ended up the way it was. I mean, the big thing that comes to mind, where there was the Jarhead's Motorcycle Club accident a few years ago, and there was a lot of stuff on this on the individual that ran over the guys, but it turns out there was like all sorts of evidence that was coming up over the course of the trial, and it was barely
Right.
covered. And then it was, oh, by the way, when the final result of the trial went through, it was finally put through, where it was put out
Right.
there that the model of what exactly happened that night. And instead,
Right.
there was just a lot of stuff getting shared online over and over again that wasn't productive to actually understanding the case.
Exactly. Exactly. And yeah, and I think that because what we're also learning is that people still do trust their local news. They may not trust the national news as much, but they do trust the local news. So it is important for us to do that kind of context and that kind of, providing that information. If nothing else, yeah, and I feel like that's where we can shine, is if we are doing more of that, and we are the ones that are putting that out, and we are the ones that are being trusted with that information, then maybe, I mean, a girl can dream. Maybe people start sharing more local news than the national news, and then
Yeah.
maybe we get less and less disinformation and polarization. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I truly believe that that would happen.
Yeah, like I always talk about here on the show in terms of politics because it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to your news, if you're just paying attention to what happened to Bill up the street because he got into a bad car accident, and then it ended up being like this whole DUI thing with another driver, you don't really get any of the details. You're just gonna just not trust that the real information is getting out there. And the more local content you have, that's one thing that I don't think the patch is part of the collaborative, but what Tony Chanel has been doing with the Concord patch has been tremendous because he's actually following up on all these cases, but it's him working an ungodly amount of hours, I can only imagine, with some other
Exactly.
buddies of
Yeah.
him around town that are covering all this. A lot of news outlets, when you got to do advertising, print, and layout, and all these other things, it's hard to keep up with.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's 100% true. But
Have you?
we are trying.
Oh yeah,
We're gonna keep
that's
trying.
that's one thing I constantly
Yeah.
like these guys are not trying to like be bad actors or anything.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
wanting to get stuff out there. They're honestly trying their best. I think at this point a lot of the bad actors have been kind of filtered out because the market has been a nightmare the last 20 years. So
I think
it's
that's true.
yeah. I mean
Yeah.
there's in the ones that are blatant. A lot of it goes back, I think, to the opinion sections, or the opinion sections and the news sections, and the news sections, which is
Right,
very important
exactly.
to have that separation. I'd love
Yes.
to get like across the different parts of the state thus far they've hit. Has there been much of a difference in terms of what you're hearing from people?
Little bit, and I think that also depends on which outlet is their local paper. You know what I mean? So some outlets are actually they'll be doing the thing that the one in the previous city said that they needed, but you know what I mean? So it's a little different. It just depends on what the local news outlet is. I would say there are more similarities than differences, but like the especially in like um the overarching themes of like the ones that I mentioned, those were ones that were universal across all three cities that we've gone to so far. Just the idea of the news to be we want there to be practical things in the newspaper that we can use, like news you can use, as they used to say. I mean, we want that, you know. I wouldn't none of the big differences really jump out to me at the moment, but I think like there were a lot more similarities than there were differences for sure.
It's kind of surprising to see anecdotally email becoming again like a huge a huge thing. Was something that you heard very much about?
Okay, so that is actually a really good example. That was one that I was surprised by in the very first one in Manchester. They said they are done with email. We want no more email newsletters. We have too many. We're getting too much. And then in Nashua and Concord, they were like, oh, we like those email newsletters. So again, like I think it kind of depends on the community and it depends on the people. But I do think that like more and more people, and this has been true for the past several years at least, they do like getting the information in their inbox because it's right there. They have the agency to sign up for it. They know what they're getting. It's different than just like I mean, it's maybe as convenient as going to social media, but you've curated that yourself. You know what I mean? So I think that's why they many people do prefer that. So email is another that's another one of those things.
That's fine. It's been a game changer for me with the outlets that do a
Yeah.
good job with it. It really helps
Yeah.
me stay up on what's going on. Like I think them, I give the Monitor grief all the time, but their email is great that they do every day. I get the
Yeah.
Monitor, I get the Bulletin, I believe I get you guys on there and things of that nature. And it's just as someone who wants to stay up on what's going on in my state, it's huge because people. I think a big part of the barrier is people think they got to read all of them every day. It's like you can just delete it.
I
It's
know,
not gonna
right?
hurt anything.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like it'll be okay.
I know. Yeah.
So what? We only got a couple minutes left here. Like, is there anything else you want to get out there when it comes to this crawl and maybe things you observed from people?
I would say, I think that one of the biggest things is that, well, there's two things. So one, at the very first event we did, I had someone come up to me and say, um, I'm a conservative and I wasn't sure at what I was going to expect from coming out to this liberal event, which, okay, it was not a news event, but I was going to let that go. And he said, I was really surprised. He's like, it was such a good conversation and it was so nice just to be able to talk about these things with people. And it wasn't, and I mean, that told us a lot. I think people are kind of starved for this communication with each other. They like actually having communication with their local journalists, like to have that opportunity to tell them, hey, you really missed this story, or you missed this, or did you hear about this? And there was another guy who said, this was the first time I ever actually talked to a reporter. I've never spoken to a journalist before. And it was fascinating to find out how they do their job. And so I think the more we can all do that, and I think we are all doing that, the better. And I'll say, for years we've had discussions about declining, and I mentioned this, but declining trust in media. And what we're seeing is way more nuanced than that. And I think people distrust the quote unquote media, the bigger media, I think, but many people still trust us and they know and recognize us. And I think we want to do everything we can to keep that trust going forward and build on that for sure. And everyone should come out to all the other publisher crawls that we have. They are lots of fun and there's free food and local news bingo, which is a blast.
Awesome. Melanie, Plenda, the Granite State News Collaborative. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this, and everyone should definitely check out collaborativenh.org, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, go check them out. Great work over there, and all. Trust, just listen to your local journalists. Like you just figure it out. Just listen a little bit and stop assuming politics for everything. I'm guilty of that, just like anyone else. But we got to listen. So NewEnglandTake.com. We're at the end of the show. I'm AJ Kierstead. Big thank you to WKXL for picking up the program. NHTalkRadio.com. Thanks to Concord TV and the GraniteGrock.com. AJ at NewEnglandTake.com if you want to reach out to me. Talk to you soon.